On Thursday, the Trump administration announced that it would begin what it calls continuous vetting of all current 55 million United States visa holders. Now, of course, this is coming on the heels of the news that Marco Rubio announced that the administration will also begin pausing new visas being issued for commercial truck drivers after that absolute awful situation in Florida, where what I believe was a foreign national truck driver who apparently couldn't really speak English caused the death of an entire family of 3 people. And a combination of these two events back to back has shown Americans that the administration really is serious about tracking down anyone that it considers to be anti-American, or at the very minimum, detrimental to America or not beneficial to Americans, which in my opinion is long overdue. Now, you might not think a whole lot of this headline, but one thing that immediately jumped out and just grabbed my attention was, wait a minute, 55 million visa holders?
What?
And apparently, I wasn't the only one who found that number rather preposterously high. You guys realize only like 60% of America is US citizens if this is the official numbers? Deport them all and a housing crisis becomes a non-issue. Why was there 55 million visas to begin with? Did we let the whole galaxy in or something on H-1Bs? Why do we have 55 million visa holders here? 55 million? That's almost 16% of the population. And of course, there's always that one guy. But we can't get the Epstein list. Now that 55 million number, in my opinion, is quite shocking because if that's true, then 16% of our population isn't even American. So of course that means I had to do some digging. And as it turns out, there is actually some good news here. I'm not even going to bury the headline. Out of 55 million, those who are actually living here in the United States, that would be those here on temporary visas, green card holders and permanent residents, and H-1B visa holders, that only totals about 16 million out of that 55 million number, which is significantly lower than initial estimates. In fact, that remaining 30 or so million are going to be people here on tourist and business visas, students and student exchange visitors, temporary workers, those are here on diplomatic and government visas, as well as people who just never come in the first place. They just park a visa in case they want to come to the United States one day and they never show up, which I imagine a lot of wealthy people will probably get. Let's say you're a resident of China or Thailand and you want to go to the United States one day. Well, you're going to do all the paperwork, fill out the paperwork necessary in order to get a visa to at least visit or perhaps even potentially work towards getting permanent residency one day, but you're just going to sit on that stuff. After all, these things aren't something you just spur of the moment decide to do. You don't just up and decide to go to another country one day. It takes a lot of planning. So a lot of these are people with visas who just literally do nothing with them. So if I were to compare that 55 million number, which was about 16% of our population, if I were to pare it down to the actual number, which is 16 million, that'll make it so that those who live here as actual residents, only about 4.7%, which is far more manageable of a number. But let's continue. If I were to break down that 16 million number even further, and petition specifically to the H-1B visa holders, which has been definitely a contentious issue lately, that's going to be about 730,000 people, not including their dependents, which is about another 550,000. So 1.28 million in total. Now this is a really relevant number because those who come here as H-1B visa holders are often ones that are hired by tech companies or engineering firms to get some short-term work done that supposedly Americans aren't capable of doing. In fact, on X specifically, I found several posts of people claiming that companies were specifically hiring employees that only had H-1B visas, meaning they were going out of their way just to exclude Americans. Now that does seem illegal to me, so I'm not going to share the post here because I don't know how true that is. However, I would say that companies are definitely going out of their way, in general, to pursue their bottom line as much as possible without any consideration for the actual country that bore them in the first place. Now yes, I understand there are definitely concerns with regards to having the actual people capable of doing the labor that you need for your product, but I bet if employers were actually willing to put in the work, put in the effort to try to train people here in the United States to do their jobs, eventually that vacuum of the skills necessary to perform certain jobs would cause people coming out of college or going into college to actually learn the skills necessary to backfill what companies need in probably about 4 to 8 years. But since companies are going out of their way to hire overseas or to just use overseas firms to do their processing, whether those be virtual or machine related, then we're just not gonna get the labor we need or produce it. So H-1B kind of produces a double-edged sword where the company can claim that Americans don't have the skills necessary, but they also create the environment where Americans end up not having the skill necessary. Yeah.
Boy, oh boy.
And in my opinion, it definitely needs to be restricted. I actually think 600,000 people here on H-1B visas, unfortunately, is too high. I think maybe if you're a Fortune 500 company, you can have a few employees here and there that need those visas to fulfill perhaps really critical roles in engineering or medicine. But I think those should be the extreme exception. So to recap, that 55 million number, drum roll please, is really inflated. And that's a good thing. We want headlines that seem crazy to actually be crazy. That 55 million number is actually around 16 million. Now that does not take into account the number of people who are here illegally, which by estimates are anywhere from 11 to 25 million, depending on who you go to. Now if you combine that with people who are here as residents, that gets you anywhere from 27 million to 41 million, which coincidentally is close to that 55 million you started out with in the first place. Now that is actually a terrifying thing, because as a combination of people who are here both legally and illegally, a bare minimum of 10% of our population to a maximum of 17% of our population are not American citizens. Now, that actually does have disastrous effects downwind to the housing market, because all those people need to live somewhere, and if anywhere from 11 to 17% of your population is foreign born, that means 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 5 of your houses are being occupied by someone who's not an American citizen. That's going to cause major issues in your housing market. That's going to drive prices up for people who are American citizens trying to make a living and trying to make a family and live and grow in the United States. Furthermore, combine that with people who are here taking low-skilled jobs away from Americans who are perfectly capable of doing them themselves. We're not really on a sustainable path. Now, if you want to know more about the history of legal immigration in the United States, I actually did a video on it entitled, I Researched 100 Years of U.S. Immigration, Here's the Truth. It should be somewhere on your screen, right? Maybe somewhere around here. I'll leave a link to it in the description. But TLDR is, it's been going on for about 100 years. Now that I've debunked that 55 million number, let's get to something that is actually really sad. I mentioned at the beginning of the video of a tragedy that struck in Florida when an illegal alien who was not capable of reading English caused the deaths of an entire family of 3 people. I think you've probably already seen the video. I'm not going to play it here. It's rather strange, but one of the strangest things about this, there are actually 2 things that are strange about this. One, the man who caused this accident, doing an illegal U-turn in the middle of the highway, didn't really seem to have any remorse. In fact, he was just staring glibly at the camera. I don't know, if I feel like if I turned a tractor trailer around in the middle of the highway and 3 people rammed into the side of my vehicle and died on impact, I'd feel more emotion than this. Maybe shock or surprise or remorse or something. But this is just none of those things, and it's definitely been off-putting to a lot of people. And the second shocking thing about this, I didn't find out until a few days later. He fled the scene and ran back to California, and Florida actually had to have him extradited back to be able to charge him. Now, the exact details to this, I'm not sure, but needless to say, Florida was not happy about this. Now, and of course, this case, which has gotten national attention at this point, has caused a lot of questions, namely, why was this man allowed to get a license in the first place to drive on our roads? I don't think people who can't speak English should be driving with a license. I'm sorry. If you're not capable of passing a proficiency test, then you shouldn't be on the road. And definitely not as a truck driver. Now, I did some digging and I found out that apparently he was issued a full-term commercial driver's license in Washington State in July 2023, despite not being a lawful U.S. resident, which is a violation, of course, of both state and federal regulations. And he obtained a limited term, CDL, in California in 2024, even though California itself mandates English-only CDL exams and generally restricts CDLs to citizens or permanent residents. And on top of that, as I stated already, he didn't pass the English test. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration administered an English proficiency test along with a road sign comprehension test, saying only answered 2 out of 12 English questions correctly and identified just 1 of 4 traffic signs. That just underlies something that is severely wrong with our country, because we can be all freaked out about, oh no, there's 55 million people here legally, oh, what's going on? We need to find out what's going on there. There are states that are clearly in open rebellion against any kind of federal law. You're telling me that not only do certain states like Washington State or California, I think both consider themselves sanctuary states, both of these states can just say, we're going to allow legal aliens to live here. We're going to give them driver's licenses that are capable of not only driving in their states, but also driving in all the other states. I'm sorry, but that's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. If Idaho decides that they don't want to be a sanctuary state, that doesn't mean that Washington State can just give them driver's licenses, let them be a truck driver, and then just drive all over the rest of the United States. No, if you want to do something in your state, then do it in your state. Let it stay there. And 2, that really shows that there's a systemic rot that's going on here. And I know for a fact this isn't the first time this has happened. It's just the first time it's made national news, or at least in a long time, because these things have cascading effects. Just like earlier when I was saying that having a number of people here either legally or illegally will cause upward pressure on the price of housing, or choosing not to hire Americans and train Americans to do certain skills will lead Americans not to want to take those skills when they go to college or trade school. The downstream effect here of allowing illegal aliens to just come into the country and not properly integrate, not be properly taught English, not become American citizens and learn what it really means to be an American, means that things like this will happen. People who are incapable of reading signs will be on the road. with you. And because they're here illegally, well, we're just not going to do anything about it. Because doing something about it would raise the fact that they're here illegally, and that might get them deported, and that's mean. So instead of the state governments, and in some instances the federal government doing its job, innocent Americans will have their lives lost. All because the chain of command, or those who are supposed to be responsible for ensuring American safety, just decide to do nothing. And the longer this goes on, the more downstream effects reveal themselves. It isn't just one city or one state decides to have sanctuary policy. It affects all Americans. That's why federal laws exist. There are certain things that states and municipalities shouldn't be able to get away with because it affects everyone else as a citizen. And that really underscores the need for the Trump administration to crack down on these things. Start holding officials to account. State officials, municipality officials, city officials. Go in there and start arresting them. Start holding them accountable for the things that those who are under a sanctuary policy decide to do that are illegal. If you want to sit here and pretend like everyone who comes in the country illegally just have no responsibility for their actions, then okay, that's fine. Let's pretend like they have no responsibility for their actions. Now, you take responsibility for their actions. American citizens die, we charge you for it. Congratulations. Now you're in the hot seat. I bet I'll solve the problem real fast. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Tell me in the comment section. Am I being too cruel? Should we just allow states to have their own local sanctuary policies? Should we allow cities to just kind of run amok and do whatever they want? Because, you know, it's too cruel. It's too interventionist to dictate what cities and municipalities do with their money and their time. Or perhaps the Trump administration is being too nice and too soft. Perhaps we need to get in there and deport everyone and send them all to jail. Look, I don't know. I'm probably somewhere between the two. I don't see someone who's here legally as a resident as immediately a bad thing. But I do think there are definitely downstream effects that can be caused from having too many people who are foreign-born in the United States. Because in the end, I prioritize American citizens, and I expect other countries to prioritize their citizens as well. I don't really think that's entirely unreasonable. I prioritize my family over neighbors. I prioritize my neighbors over random people across the state. I prioritize my country over Canada or Mexico, and I expect them to do the same. I just wish that our leaders would prioritize American citizens over other countries more often. And that, my friend, is why you have Donald Trump as president. Stories like this one about this truck driver, Harjinder Singh, would just be swept under the rug within a week or two, if it even made the news at all. But now the Trump administration in office, the moment this hit the headlines, they were ready and willing to immediately take action, because this has been happening for decades. And Americans have been asking our officials to actually take our own priorities seriously for decades. So, all in all, you might think that the Trump administration has failed at a lot of things. I respect this, and I think you should too. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comment section down below your compliments or criticisms, and go check out the rest of my videos. I normally do cultural content kind of like this, where I talk about either current events or things that I believe are important in our culture. Like this one entitled The Population Bomb, which talks about the crisis of population and birth rates in the United States. Or even this other video where I set the record straight, talking about my thoughts on history in general and the role that the supposed colonizers and even the Catholic Church had on that history, as well as a healthy amount of just responding to comments. But overall, I hope my video was informative for you, the viewer, and thank you for stopping by. I'll see you again next time. Bye!